In the world we live in, everything is modern. Modern technology, modern ways of transportation, a modern society, you name it. However, the world wasn't always as modern as it is today. There was a time in history when modern inventions were just being invented. It was when new technological advancements, such as machines and motor vehicles, had just been introduced to Canada between the years 1890 and 1905. This is known as the Canadian Industrial Age, or industrialization for short. So, what is industrialization? Industrialization is the process of using technology and machines to replace some tasks that would otherwise be done by people, therefore, making work easier and more efficient. During industrialization, newly invented machines were being used in factories to produce goods more quickly for a lower cost. Industrialization caused important changes in the economic status of different groups in society. It allowed people to shift from rural areas to urban areas. People moved away from rural areas to find jobs in factories. When did the industrial age start? The years 1890 to 1905 were significant in the history of the Canadian industrial age. Before the 1890s, goods had to be produced by hand. By 1901, Canada's economy was transitioning from agricultural to industrial. Canada's provinces were growing at different rates. At that time, central Canada, consisting of Ontario and Quebec, was the most advanced in industrialization, leading the market in agriculture, fishing, forestry, mining, and trapping. The importance of manufacturing was gradually increasing. Factories were assembled primarily in central Canada to produce more goods for North America, Canada, and the US, and to export to Britain. Factories gradually started popping up across Canada, which helped increase Canada's economy and advance industrialization even further. Where did industrialization start? The Industrial Revolution started in Toronto and Montreal, as they were the most industrialized cities at the time. Industrialization gradually became more widespread, spreading across Ontario, Quebec, and all across Canada. Why was industrialization so important? The Industrial Revolution was important because industrialization helped advance trade and grow businesses. Industrialization was also developed to make jobs easier and more efficient, relying on machines and technology rather than human hands. Who was involved in industrialization? Children, women, and men worked long hours for little in return. Moreover, the working conditions were typically unsafe and nasty. Women played a major role in the development of industrialization. Women used to work on the factory assembly lines. Even if they did the same job, women were paid less than men. Children were a huge part of industrialization as they were the cheapest worker option available to employ for companies. Most children would leave school by the time they were 10 years old and go to work. Children worked as housekeepers or in large factories. There was also a lot of child labor. Like women, children were also paid less than men, even if they did the same job. The Industrial Revolution majorly impacted indigenous people. Indigenous communities were forced away from their lands due to the industrialization causing damage to their lands. Some indigenous people also left their communities to work in factories. In cities like Toronto and Montreal, people lived close to factories in polluted and crowded streets. How did industrialization change Canada? Industrialization changed the way work was done in Canada. New machines and technology were implemented in factories, which transformed Canada's economy, making Canada more reliable. Industrialization still has a major impact on Canada today. What was the historical significance of industrialization? Industrialization changed the way the world works. Before industrialization, people mainly focused on agriculture, and they were producing goods by hand. Industrialization allowed people to work in factories that would simplify the process of making goods. Machines would make the individual parts, and all the workers had to do was put it all together. What are the causes and effects of industrialization? Cause: the growing use of machines that contributed to the Industrial Revolution led to a demand for workers with new skills. There was a high demand for skilled machine operators. Effect: work became more easy and efficient. Factories were growing in mass population. Thousands of people have been recruited to work in these factories, creating a more efficient workflow. Industrialization grew all across Canada and simplified the way we produce and process items. There were also some marginalized voices during industrialization. These were people who were mistreated by their bosses or people who were affected by industrialization. Some missing voices during Canada's industrial age were children. They were beaten if they didn't show up to work on regular hours or if they didn't meet their foreman's expectations. Industrialization has significantly affected the First Nations' lives. It caused them to leave their communities and work in factories instead, and damaged the indigenous lands. Some women were also marginalized. Women's rights were not granted by some industrial companies. There are many advantages and disadvantages when it comes to industrialization, so here are five of each. Pro. Industrialization allowed the mass production of goods. Goods became more affordable for the public. Industrialization also created more job opportunities, such as machine operators and assemblers. Industrialization created newer technology, which improved transportation. People would use motor vehicles instead of horses, allowing goods to be transported more efficiently. Industrialization also allowed people to have simpler lives. Cons. Workers had poor working conditions. Machines were also often dangerous and would lead to many injuries. Factories were also dirty and unhealthy for people to work in. Child labor was a massive issue. Child labor was common with many companies, and a law was created in the early 1900s that didn't allow children to work in jobs that would normally be done by adults. Women were sometimes neglected. Some companies never really paid much attention to women, and women were also paid a lower income than men. Factories and vehicles increased air and water pollution, releasing toxic gases into the environment. Here are three thick questions that I created. How did the Industrial Revolution become so successful? The Industrial Revolution carved a path for advanced future inventions, allowing new machinery and modes of transport, such as factory machines and motor vehicles. These new inventions simplified people's lives and allowed goods to be transported much more easily. How has Canada's Industrial Revolution influenced the rest of the world? Canada had established trade with Great Britain, supplying them with raw materials and obtaining manufactured goods in return. These trades helped Britain advance further and industrialize themselves and their surrounding allies. What are the most important issues that emerged from the Industrial Revolution? Child labor, workplace conditions, and environmental harm were the worst issues that came out of the Industrial Revolution. These issues were later solved by new laws and new technologies that were developed in the 20th century. Finally, here are some facts about industrialization. Toronto and Montreal were Canada's largest industrial cities. Steam power was one of the primary sources of energy during industrialization. Steam power allowed certain goods to be produced faster for a lower cost. In 1904, there was a fire at a factory in downtown Toronto. The fire had destroyed more than 100 buildings, most of them being factories and warehouses, by the time the firefighters could put it out. According to estimates, the incident resulted in over 5,000 workers losing their jobs. It's not clear what caused the fire. However, the cause of the fire was suspected to be a malfunctioning stove or electrical failure. One of the most common jobs before industrialization was farming. During industrialization, many people moved away from farms to larger cities for a better lifestyle. Industrialization has had a significant impact on Canada and the rest of the world. Industrialization simplified our lives, allowing daily tasks like going to work or school to be done more efficiently. Though industrialization has many cons, they are overcome by its benefits. Hope you learned something new about industrialization. Thanks for watching.